Hello everyone, Corey from Aquarium Co-Op, back with another live stream every Sunday. Keep it consistent. That's the topic of tonight's show is consistency and how it can help you and also hurt you in your aquarium hobby. Now, most times it's really going to help you to be consistent, but there are things we can do with consistency to also make it worse. So, I think one of the basic things people can do is do consistent water changes, right? And so a lot of people will always change 50% every week or something like that. And for a lot of your tanks, that does really well. And then there's times when we break that consistency where it really hurts us. So if we think about it, think of you're doing 50% water change every week, right? No matter what. If we ever have to stop doing that, we're going to break that consistency, and we could have nitrates get really high, and we could have problems there. Conversely, we could also be having problems where we're stripping out all the nutrients and our planted tank is struggling. But what we do know is fish like consistency. They like it to remain the same all the time. And so as long as we are doing something the same, usually fish will thrive. And that's where we get things like old tank syndrome, where that might be where we don't change water at all on our aquarium, and over time it just ever so slowly changes. So the consistency is relatively the same. And then one day we go, well, it's time to do my big old clean. And you do, your gravel vac, and you're cleaning the filter, and you're changing the water, and you're doing all these things, and scrubbing decorations, and you fill it back up, and the next day you wake up, and, a third of your fish are dead, the rest are sick, there's some gasping, and it's because we kind of put our fish through pH shock, or we could have an ammonia spike, things like that. So, consistency can prevent a lot of things, but then also if we consistently do something wrong, can also hurt us as well. And that's, a lot of times people will do things consistently wrong without knowing it, and we do a lot of things with consistency that we think are good and are good. Consistency also gets us into trouble when it comes to like dosing a planted aquarium, right? You got your brand new planted aquarium, you're dosing, one capful of something every week, or a couple of pumps, or whatever it is, and then 3 months later you're doing the exact same thing. It's remained consistent, and yet all the plants are 3 times as big now, and so actually the consistency is hurting because we do everything the same every time. We're now starving those plants, and so I think there are good routines we can use to our advantage. A water change schedule after we do testing and stuff like that. Consistency, like if you checked your water every Sunday during the live stream and then changed water accordingly, that could be a good consistent thing. Automatic feeders can be a good consistent thing if we're keeping track to recalibrate it based on how many fish, as well as I've totally forgotten the third one already. I didn't have it. I was thinking, there was another thing I wanted to bring. Oh, lighting. Lighting timers in general, much better to be consistent with that than all over the place. So that one's another one that's really easy to kind of implement that consistency and get a lot of benefit out of it. So Adam Till says, I like large volume tanks for the consistency too. That and large plant volumes work well with a busy work schedule. It totally can, Adam. But keep in mind, just because you have a large tank like the 800 gallon, if I was to change 90% on it, it could still crash it. If my tank was used to, let's say, 30% water change, and then I decide, like, oh, well, I gotta get this big rock out of there or something, I'm gonna drain a bunch of water, like that, breaking that consistency could hurt. And so you're susceptible to it, whether it's a giant tank or a small tank. And, in general, larger volumes of water, it's not that they can handle a difference in consistency more than something else. It's that we tend not to change it as much. So like, let's say I have a 1,000 gallon aquarium, and I go, well, I'm going to change 50% every week. And then you try to do it and you go, wait a second, 500 gallons of warm water, if you have a normal hot water heater, might take you 5 or 6 hours. So then you might go, well, Turns out I only change, 10% every week, so it's 100 gallons, right? And it also could be that because you have the same amount of fish, whether it was 500 gallons or 1,000 gallons of water, they're producing less waste, and that means you need to change less. So that works out well as well. But really, big swings on anything, whether it's temperature, stuff like that, and you can make an argument that a big tank would not swing as much when it comes to temperature. That's a true statement, but also then it doesn't swing down as fast. So like in my store, for instance, with all the water in there, if it finally does get too hot, it can be really cold outside and it takes a long time to cool back down. And so we're prolonging that. It is consistently cooling down slowly, but you got to manage it on both sides. So $5 super chat from Nisi. Well, thank you, Nisi. Thank you. Thank you all. You're great for your great advice and being such a great mentor for us all. For us awesome fish keepers. Fish fam. Hashtag hug all your tanks. All your fish tanks, really. I was telling my cousin, which we know the little girl from that video. My cousin now works at my store, and I was telling him I had to go and film an update pretty soon, or there's going to be a mutiny on YouTube. People are demanding to see an update to that, so we'll be doing it eventually. Let's see here. I'm probably only going for about an hour today. I got some stuff I got to get done. I'm kind of behind the ball. There's a lot of big things happening that's tying up a crazy amount of time, and right now, like, we got to work on getting a few more videos out for this week and stuff like that. So nature is consistently inconsistent, says LR Brett's Aquatics. I would say that's a true statement. Yeah. You know, the goal is not to have something be so different that we lose fish. So, all right, looking light should be on 10 to 12 hours a day, especially if it's a planted tank. Yeah, that could be. Yep. I'd say consistency that you can balance your fertilizer and water change schedule around would help you quite a bit. Much easier to service one 800-gallon than 8 100-gallon tanks, I reckon. So I believe it could be easier to service one 800-gallon tank, but I would bet you that for a consistency standpoint, 8 100-gallon tanks, you're much less likely to do something so bad to one of them to crash. Like, you'd be really hard to crash all 8 tanks as opposed to just one. And you might think about like a stock portfolio. Putting everything in one basket might be easier, but your odds and your odds of either making money or losing money spread out over 8 things might be more consistent. So the 800 gallon might be more bang or bust, and then the 800 gallons might be more just consistent. Like, well, yeah, I had one tank have a problem, and even when we talk about that. It's the reason I use a lot of different tanks in my fish store. So it's like if this tank over here got sick, it won't affect this tank. But if it was 800 gallons of water and all those fish were together, they're all going to get sick most likely. $5 super chat from Dan says, hashtag feed Jimmy. That's right. Part of one of the big things is me and Jimmy are kind of apartment shopping. He's not in the state yet. We're kind of looking at places and calling and figuring out and doing what we can do. So that going on, plus some other kind of, not secret projects, but not worth talking about until they're finalized. So, yeah, there's a lot of things. I don't want to like get people's hopes up, and then they're like, oh man, what happened to that thing that you said was going to happen? It's not happening now. So, trying to catch up here. Well, I want to remind everyone, well, Bees Aquatic says hit that like button, so that's a good thing. So hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe, and then there's also some deals going on today. The employee said, like, man, we got a lot of plants right now, and I said, oh yeah? And so I put the low light plant package on sale, 30% off, and so yeah, we've been selling quite a few of them. I don't know how many more are available, but if you want to save some money on some plants, do that. And then we already had the Eheim auto fish feeders. We had a deal going where if you buy one of those, you get a free package of the omnivore pellets. Now, I think when I was looking earlier, there's about 11 left, which means we got about 1/3 of what we started with, and I'm sure those will kind of sell out over tonight early tomorrow morning type of deal. But those are going on. What I wanted to remind everyone about, though, was the podcast. I'm going to try and do a few more podcast episodes, like podcast only, that type of stuff. So make sure you hop over to the website and check it out. For those of you that have been using it, you probably noticed I redid the whole podcast player so you can download them and do all those kinds of things. And just because I've been listening to some more podcasts, and I was like, I could do this. I could offer some content to listen to only, because I would wager a bunch of you are doing that right now, just listening to this while working in the background and doing other things. So, $5 super chat from Corpse a Lot. In your experience, does consistency have effect on your fish appetite, and if so? Only so much so in that if they eat the same food every day and you try to introduce them to a new food, they usually won't take to that. It's been, at least I've seen it, and I've watched other people prove it as well. Like if you have an automatic fish feeder on a tank, if you take the automatic fish feeder off, they still will know what time it is. So if it was set to feed every day at 5 p.m., you will watch all those fish go to that corner at like 4:55 and start, bustling around waiting for that food to come in. They can tell time somehow, and I'm not saying somehow like it's inconceivable, but they can see different, like light coming into the room. They can use some indicators to go, hey, it's usually about when that thing happened and that thing happened that food happens. And because it's on a consistent schedule, that's what clues them into that. So it does have an effect in that aspect. But I haven't seen, any other effects on appetite, really. Well, that's not true. If I consistently feed a fish like every 2 hours, it will lower the aggression. So what that means is we're lowering their appetite because we're keeping them fed, and as a byproduct of that, we can lower some aggression sometimes as well. Flynn's Fish Forum says, do you agree when people say things like in the wild, example, in the wild lights could be on for 8 hours one day and 2 the next? Is consistency a thing in the wild for fish? I don't know if it's going to be super consistent, but what I find when people start quoting the wild, like in that exact statement you gave, it's very true that in the wild, lights could be on for different periods of time, right? But most times in the wild, there's also a crazy amount of algae or no plants at all growing or stuff like that. So if you're talking about a pure only fish tank, then yeah, it doesn't really matter. But in a planted aquarium, it makes it much more difficult for us as a hobbyist to try and recreate what's going on. Well, that's not even true. We're not even really recreating what's going on in nature. We're trying to create something we deem better than nature. Because nature's got a ton of algae. We're trying to make an aquarium with plants from all different varieties around the world look spotlessly clean, which is actually different than what nature does. So it depends on what you're trying to do, and I think most of us as aquarists are trying to pull off something that nature's not doing, and that is creating our own perfect environment. $5 super chat from Dean H., one of the mods. Thank you so much, buddy. Great to see your eye is healing. Hope your eye is feeling better. Yep, not a problem at all. That's kind of why I have a little interruption with the schedule, and why we've been busy is because I didn't film a whole bunch. Like I did work, but I didn't film. Normally I'm filming tons and tons and tons and tons, and I did not do that while I was recouping my eye. I wasn't supposed to do anything too labor intensive. I was supposed to take it a little bit easy, and so I thought, it's a good excuse to work on the website and the podcast and those types of things, in addition to filming a little bit. 613 Aquatic says, how often do I add Tums to my tank? Snail shell is cracked and white. I would recommend testing the water for hardness. That won't necessarily tell you how much calcium's in that water, but it can give you an insight to it. If it's running really, really hard, then it might mean that you've got plenty and something else is going on, like they're not eating enough calcium. But if you were to test it and the water shows very soft, then it would let you know. So if your water's soft, you put it in a Tums, and a week later it's moderately hard, I'd say you're doing probably pretty good. If it's still really soft, then go ahead and dose more if you're noticing, if you're noticing you're having problems. I would subscribe to your podcast. I'm listening in the background as I get my shrimp tank ready for Rob's contest. Yeah, we've had the podcast, or at least the podcast channel, or whatever you want to call it, if you will, set up for a long time. And in fact, I was looking at it. We've got 96 episodes on there, so this will be 97. We're closing in on 100, so that's a pretty good clip. A lot of content to listen back to while you're driving or something like that. This is gonna sound crazy, but someone asked if I heard about the attack on London last night. So yes, I heard about it. I think my wife mentioned it, and then I heard about it in Rob's live stream. But I literally don't even have cable TV, and I spend so much time working that I don't really read the news. And I know that seems crazy to some people, but I focus on working so much that I forget to not work. And so, yeah. Can I give an example of an inconsistency that prompts breeding behavior in fish? Well, I think one of the most common ones people know about is like a big cold water change on Corydoras. That's kind of the bringing of the new season, if you will. And yeah, it's just known to trigger them. And also like a big thing of food will do it for Corydoras as well. Rain, like if you simulate rain on the top of the water, that can really help like haplocats. So those are some things that don't happen all the time. And if they were happening all the time, like let's say you always had cold water, that wouldn't help. So it's that inconsistent part that actually triggers that. Seth's Aquariums. Hey Corey, any thoughts about consistency in filtration? How often to clean sponges, add, remove substrate, how much to polish detritus, etc.? Well, I would say doing things normal or consistently, if they've been working for you and keeping that consistency going, is a good thing. So what you don't want to do, or at least I don't recommend, is let's say you neglected them for 3 months and then you go in and you deep clean all your filters. I think that is much worse for your tank than, for instance, every month servicing one of your filters. So let's say you had 3 filters and you serviced one each month. I think that's way better than doing them all every 3 months. And obviously you can change that schedule around to you're servicing, let's say, a filter every 2 weeks, and you just keep that system going. That would only ever maybe disrupt 1/3 of your, bacterial colony, or let's say you forgot to plug one back in, or, so you're spreading out that risk while keeping it consistent, and not having these real big peaks and valleys when it comes to, let's say, detritus or bacteria counts or temperature or anything like that. $5 super chat from LG3 Nation. Well, thank you, buddy. We'll put it towards the Jimmy's Gotta Drive from Ohio to Washington Fund. Consistency in foods. Brine Tuesday, every time flake. Wednesday, no fail. Good or bad, though? I like to consistently change it up. So, like, if I do live brine shrimp, the next day I want to do a dry food. And then the following day I would do a live brine shrimp again. And then the following day a dry food, so that I'm switching in between the two. But I do that consistently. Consistency is kind of a weird metric, because you can say I just consistently feed good foods, or I consistently feed frozen. You can make almost anything. Like, I consistently ignore my aquarium. Like, everything can be consistent, but it's the routine and finding consistency in your life that you can actually keep being consistent at for your aquariums. Is there a good substrate I can use as a bottom layer instead of stones or gravel? The one I have is very buoyant, and some substrate balls keep floating up. So instead of stones or gravel, I suppose like a coarser sand. But if you rule out all stones and gravel, that doesn't leave you with a whole lot. It leaves you with either clay-based, which it sounds like you already have, or a coarser sand. So if you're not having luck with those, I would say something like a coarser sand might work for you. Does 100% of the fund go towards Jimmy? Yes, in a way. So it's not that literally I will hand him all this money, because it's an accounting nightmare to do that. What legally would happen is you guys donate money through the super chat. YouTube takes 30%. Then it will come into the Aquarium Co-op like general fund, like if we had sold something. and then it's just going to sit there. And basically, I'm using money to pay Jimmy's salary and the crazy cost it is to move him over here. But all of those are still going to have taxes. So, like, if I was to hand that money to Jimmy, he still has to pay taxes and all that. And we're going to do it through paychecks so that it's all documented correctly. And there's no IRS questions like, why did this giant sum of money get handed over and things like that. So it's got to go through the accountants and all that. There's got to be that legal paper trail all the way through. But I can tell you this. You guys, if you ever get to a point where you're donating so much money that it is way more than Jimmy's salary, we will do one of two things. We will either A, pay Jimmy more, which would be a good thing, or B, we will find another way to use that money. Like, for instance, some of the costs that are going up by moving Jimmy here earlier than we anticipated, which is this month. Now I have to I need to, when I'm done the live stream, I should probably do this. I have to buy a plane ticket for him from here to Chicago, because before he was living in Ohio, he was just going to drive to Chicago. But now I got to try and see if I can find him a seat on the plane we're already flying on, or a different route. And the sooner I book it, the cheaper it will be, as opposed to waiting last minute. And I would really love it if he could fly on the same plane, because then we can all go in the same vehicle. It's already me and Steamfod Aquatics, and we'll add Jimmy there. We take the same vehicle, go to the airport, we all leave at the same time, we all come back at the same time, we're all staying in the same hotel room. And so, yeah, there's lots of things. Like, I want to go, there's some things in the work for me to go visit some farms in Florida. Well, I'd love to take Jimmy. Jimmy can help film, we can help do stuff, and it's expensive when you start flying multiple people around, but the footage should be tenfold better. We can bring his drone, we can do all these things. So WTF 1A1A with the $5 super chat. Can you simplify it more? A little tired. For example, pretend you're trying to explain this to someone who never had a tank at all and would like to start. Okay. What I would recommend is, whatever you start doing, just make sure you do it the same way every day or every week. So what that means is, if you feed a pinch of food, feed that pinch of food every single day. If you have a light on a timer, let it be the same every day. If you water change once a week, water change every single week. And why do I recommend this? Because if you were to start having problems, we can then know, okay, you've done this every blah, blah, blah days. You've done this every week. And so let's say you had nitrates that were going up by 20% every week. We might recommend you change 15% more of your total water volume every week. But if you say, well, yeah, I change water. Well, how often? Well, I did it about 3 weeks ago, and then I did it yesterday. And well, what about before that? I think it was like a month before that. It's really hard to know how many nitrates you're actually building, for instance. And like, let's say you're dosing your aquarium with fertilizers, and you're like, well, I kind of forget sometimes. So this week I dosed it twice. Last week it was once. And then, next week I'm thinking I'm going to up it. I'm going to do it 3 times. And so that inconsistency makes it really hard when you're going, well, what part's going wrong, And so if we boil it down to whatever you're doing, do it consistently. It makes it a lot easier to just find out where we might be going wrong, and then change that consistent routine slightly to hopefully start getting the result we want long term. Oh no. Andikin donated $43.21 Canadian. Do the math on this one. Whew, I don't even want to attempt. 4, 3, 2, 1. All I know is myself and Jimmy are appreciative for that. I think we're going to be able to make some really cool things happen. I just know there's so many cool events. Not events, but little opportune moments that if Jimmy was with me, he would have filmed. And I'd be like, oh my God, did you get that? That's amazing. Because half the time I'm actually working with someone, and then I was like, actually, that was really cool. Man, had I filmed that, that would have been amazing. But I'm caught up in the moment of doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I don't always have my editor or director's cap on going, I should have filmed that. What was I thinking? Why didn't I bring my camera? So Braden's Beta says, how do you keep my FERT dosing consistent when whenever I do a full dose, I get algae? Sometimes even no ferts give me algae. It's a 55 with a Nubius, a huge Amazon, Crips, and Val with a weekly water change. Well, the first thing of that is, if you have too much fertilizer or no fertilizer, both of those grow you algae. The goal is to get the right amount of algae to the right amount that it needs. And so, I think the problem you might be hanging up on there is the only two options you've offered your aquarium is full dose and zero. The correct answer might be 3/4 of a dose or half a dose or whatever it is. And that's where, if you remain consistent, and let's say you're going, okay, I'm full dosing every week, and I'm changing water once a week, and I'm getting algae. Well, are you getting algae because you have 0 nitrates left in the water? If so, the answer is, let's try doing 1.5 doses for a while. Keep that consistent. Algae problem, does it go away? Or let's say you had way too much nitrogen in there, and then you go, okay, well, you were dosing once, for 1 full dose per week. Let's go to half a dose per week. Let that run for a month. Let's see what change that makes on the aquarium. Consistency in outdoor guppy ponds with feeding. I usually use Aquarium micro pellets one day, then spirulina enhance the brine shrimp the next day. Also, what about water changes on them? So outside, I allow rain to do my water changes because I don't set them up year round. They're usually set up for 3 or 4 months or so. When it comes to feeding, this doesn't really have to do with consistency, but I only feed very tiny foods, wanting the bigger fish to eat the bugs and things like that. So I'm focused on making sure there's small enough foods for babies, but the bigger things, let them eat bugs. Or at least I want them to eat bugs. Alright. Consistency leads to balance, and balance is the key. That, there's a reason why we all look up to you, LR Bretts. That is very wise words right there. That's saying it better than I can say it. Consistency does lead, well, it can lead to balance, and balance is what we are striving for. I think that's the perfect statement. I might have to update the title of this with that, because that is definitely true. Braden's Beta says, I tried half dose once, more algae. I think it's just my plants go really slowly too. So here's the problem, Braden. You're not doing the whole consistency thing. Dosing a half dose once is not consistent. So that's where it doesn't really have an impact on your tank long term to see what the changes are. That's like saying, I went to the gym once and I worked out and I didn't drop 200 pounds, and so clearly it doesn't work. Like, it's the repetition, and your aquarium needs the same thing. It might need that half dose for 6 weeks before you start seeing the changes. There's a light in my eye. In general with an aquarium, any change you make, you probably won't see for at least 2 weeks when it comes to a planted tank specifically. That's just the way it is, because they're already storing nutrients and things like that, so you can't really evaluate something on a short scale. And when you're keeping an environment or an ecosystem, it takes a lot of work to really balance it out. But once you get it there, it's in such a sweet spot. It's awesome. Is inconsistency in stocking fish common in the hobby, like adding too many fish too quickly or disrupting the nitrogen cycle? How do you recommend people space out stocking tanks with different species? So, first, I think people have to separate adding fish and the nitrogen cycle, because in my experience, they have nothing to do with each other. And that's just because I do this all day long every day. And so what I mean by that is, whether you have, like in this bottle of water, whether I have 1 fish or 1,000 fish makes no difference. What makes the difference, though? The minute I feed them, that's where the difference is, right? Because then the filter has to process it from ammonia into nitrite into nitrate, right? But if there's no food going on and the fish that went into here had nothing in their bowels, technically they could live there, assuming we had oxygenation and stuff like that. So, this is how we get around it in like a fish store. Let's say my aquarium has 25 cardinal tetras, and we put in 1 cube of cyclops, correct? Let's just say that's correct. But then we put in 150 more cardinal tetras into that tank. As long as we only feed 1 cube of Cyclops, the load actually doesn't change on that aquarium at all. So the consistency of, let's say we always feed 2 cubes to a 20-gallon tank every single day, no matter how many fish are in there, that tank knows, oh, I can handle 2 cubes of Cyclops all day long. I do it. I do it every day. And so the amount of fish we have in there has no impact. Now, we as humans, if we don't separate those two and we go, oh, that's a lot of fish, here's 10 cubes of Cyclops, that's not being consistent anymore. That's altering it, and that's where we run into problems as aquarists mostly, is we go, oh, a lot of fish, a lot of food. And, you know, we can get there, but what I recommend people do is keep feeding your tank the way it is, no matter how many fish you add, and then next week add, like, let's say you were feeding your tank once a day, 1 cube, okay? What I would recommend doing is feeding your tank once a day for that week, but instead this time, now we want to do it every other day. We're feeding a 2nd cube. So let's say Monday it's 1 cube, Tuesday it's 2 cubes, Wednesday it's 1 cube, and so it's going to put more waste into that system, but it's going to do it moderately so that the aquarium can catch up. Now, a lot of times you're going to find that you don't add a ton of fish, so you might be going, oh, I used to feed 5 pellets, now I feed 6, like just a little bit. Think of it like you're inviting other people over for a pizza party, and 2 extra people showed up, but you had 10 pizzas anyway, and so everyone eats a little bit less pizza. They're all going to be fine. You know, you're not going to go home going, oh, God, I ate too much pizza again. You'll just go home thinking it was a good time. Travis Hemming with the $5 super chat. Thank you, buddy. Everything goes to help Jimmy. Well, help the co-op, which helps Jimmy, which helps me, which helps you guys. How can I cool my fish tank down? It gets over 90 degrees in my house when I'm not home. My recommendation is a fan. So you get a fan blowing across the water. It creates evaporative cooling. So your water is going to evaporate a ton faster, but the chemical process of water evaporating cools water. In my personal experience, it cools water by 8 to 10 degrees depending on the surface area and the fan of that aquarium. And it's kind of nice if you can have it consistent where let's say you're at 80 and you're going, I really want to be at 78, and maybe it's it would lower it to 68 and you're going, oh, that's too cold. But if you have a heater, it'll basically keep it at 78, so you can play with some of those tricks. How would I treat fin rot on fancy guppies? With erythromycin and Icex combined. Let's see here. I keep my meds and most foods in a mini fridge in the fish room. That's a good idea, Buckethead. Especially some of those medications can be very sensitive, like levamisole does not like to get outside of its temperature range. Not good for it. I just changed from... Oh, hold on. I had just changed from cold water to a mix of hot and cold, got cyanobacteria, went back to just cold, and now the cyanobacteria is gone. What a pain that was. So you kind of noticed something right there because you had your consistent routine of only using cold water, and then you changed that consistent routine and got cyanobacteria. You were able to deduce that, hey, that warm water must have brought it somehow. You reverted back to the consistent thing, and it went away. I would say you're kind of using deductive reasoning there because you were consistent. But you can imagine how if one day you were cold water, the next day is hot and cold, the next day is hot and cold, the next one's cold, the next one's cold, the next one's cold, the next one's hot and cold, you really wouldn't be able to know, like, oh, the only thing I changed was the water. It's got to be that. So, man, this... I have to keep, like, moving around because this sun is right in my eyes. I bought Seachem Flourish, Iron, and Excel. What consistence dosing should I do? Well, with those, you should probably be following their schedule online, which basically has you dosing almost every single day. And then in general, I would test for nitrates. It's very likely you would need to add Seachem nitrogen and probably potassium to those bottles to really get plants flourishing for you. What is the recommendation for the best quality, lowest price canister filter for a 125 to 150 gallon aquarium? Well, in my opinion, lowest pricing and best can't go together. So I can tell you what the cheapest is. I can tell you what the best is. Like cheapest, it's probably a Sun canister filter. And as long as, it never burns your house down, you won't have to worry about it's not being UL rated. If we're going for best, I think an FX4, in my opinion, is currently the best filter on the market for that size of tank. Personally, that's what if I had that tank and someone said you can put any filter you'd like on it, I would put that one on there. The Fish Life says, where do you recommend getting live blackworms for a natural tank? I would search out all of your local stores and find someone who carries them, because shipping them right now, especially when it's hot, it's questionable to even get them to on a plane to my store without melting down. So, yep, we are on to any questions now, because we're only going for about an hour tonight, because I've got stuff I just got to get caught up on. And, ooh, I missed a super chat. Matthew Penny said, is it worthwhile to grow out brine shrimp? That's a hard question. And the reason being, it depends what you're trying to get out of it. I really enjoy growing out brine shrimp. It's a fun experiment to watch them grow because they're live bearers when they're adults. But if you're like asking, does it make more sense to buy adult brine shrimp or grow them out? I would buy frozen ones all day long. And I see I missed another one here. What is the best way to store your Easy Green? The best possible way would be in the refrigerator, I think. If any fungal spores get inside there, it slows it down. It's out. We know it's going to be outside of light. And so that's why most manufacturers recommend the fridge, because that's the best possible scenario. That being said, it shouldn't make that much of a difference for you. Could you rank the systems you'd automate to maintain consistency? Which is the most to least important? I'll tell you the order in which I implement them, because I'm not sure one is way more important than the other, but I think some are more attainable than others. So like lighting, I think that one gives you a lot of bang for your buck, but then also is really cheap. You just got to buy a timer, and it's super easy. Like if you were sitting at the live stream right now, you went on a website and you bought a timer, in basically 2 to 3 days, you'd have it installed on your tank, and you'd never think about it again, and you made a big impact. So lighting is the first one. The second one would be an auto feeder, because same thing, you can kind of just make that choice, place an order, and make a decently substantial impact. Now, it's not going to be as easy for that one, because when you get that, you won't know exactly what the correct thing is. But you could get it to be consistent over the course of a month or two. Where you go, okay, well, I was only feeding that much. They started getting a little skinny, or they were getting too fat doing that. And so, but that's the next one, the auto feeding, or at least developing a really good schedule about feeding. And then the last one is automatic water changes. And you see that I have them, and I love them, and I really do love them, but it's also the hardest thing for most people to implement. Like in my house, it's like my only aquarium that doesn't automatically change water, and it kills me. But it's really a pain to change it to make it be able to do it. So all of them very important and really are nice, but that's probably in the order of, yeah, it's also in the order of like cheapest to most expensive, and like easiest to implement to hardest to implement. Any tips or tricks on breeding clown killies? Get a bunch of floating plants like hornwort, keep just them in the tank, and they'll make more. Usually the adults won't eat the fry, but teenage ones will eat the fry. So adults are smart enough to know, hey, don't eat my own babies, but brothers and sisters go, hey, we'll eat those. Those are snacks. Zach's Tank's Crazy Aquarium Guy, $50 SEK. Corey does not sell, he teaches. Thanks, buddy. Well, it's one and the same. Let's be real. The more I teach you guys, the more you love to stay in the hobby, the more there's a chance you might buy something from me, which is great. But that's how I feel most people should do. The best sales pitch is making someone have fun, and it's like food. Make the food taste really good. I'll be back all the time. So provide a good experience and people like it. Corpse a lot with a $10 super chat. What if I just did a water change 25% yesterday and I still have high nitrates, 30 to 40 ppm? Should I do another one sooner than later? Medium planet tank. So Corpse a lot, what'll matter here is after the water change, did you dose nitrates? If you did, that might be what's going on. Okay, that you've got extra nitrogen for your plants and they might eat that off. What I would do if it was me, and if I knew your exact thing of the last month or month and a half, I could really hone this in for you. But I would see, if you do a water change every week, part of the statement is I don't know when the last water change was, but let's say it's every Sunday, or you did it yesterday, so let's say it's every Saturday, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to test the water before you change water next Saturday. And let's say right now it's 30 to 40. If it was at 50 or 60, you know that changing 25%, you're actually falling behind each week. But if you were to change it, or if you were to measure it on Saturday and it's at 20, you know your plants are eating a lot of it, and then it's probably, you do your 25% water change, brings it down to 15, but then you put in your fertilizers, and that's bumping it up to 30 or 40. And so we have to use consistency to find what part of the equation is causing this. And so right now, if you know the whole story, then you might be able to go, oh yeah, I should do another water change. But if you don't know exactly what the problem is, I would wait till Saturday, test the water, see did we go up, did we go down, is it the same? What's causing the nitrates? Is it the fish load or is it the fertilizer load? And then I would adjust accordingly, and I would, let's say you change it to 35% water change. Let that go for a few weeks and see where your nitrates, test them every Saturday and just see, are we slowly starting to come down or are we still building up? Super chat from Nina. How do I move homes with my large koi? So this would assume that your new home already has a pond. If it doesn't, I would buy a dream pond or a show pond. They use at the koi shows. They're about 1,000 gallons, 700 gallons, or about $400. Get that set up at the new home. Then what I do is I use big Sterilite totes with lids, and I buy the ones that have a little ring around them so they're watertight. I poke a hole in the top, and then I put an air line through it, and I use an my brain can't work. Battery-powered air pump to pump oxygen in there, and each big koi gets its own tote. And you might either go, well, I can only afford to buy 2 totes, and I got 10 koi. Maybe you make 5 trips. If you're running lots of koi, like I've done before, I went to buy lots of big koi from a breeder, and my whole back of my van was filled with totes. I ran a power inverter, plugged into the cigarette lighter, and I plugged in air pumps and ran air manifolds to keep them all going because it was about a 5-hour drive. And so basically keep them filled with oxygen. Don't feed them for at least 4 or 5 days before you're going to move them. And don't let them get too hot. A lot of people run into that problem. It's taking them forever to catch them out of the pond, and they're sitting in very small water, and it's getting really hot. So the water's getting really hot, and the fish is getting hot, so it starts breathing faster. And so you want to do everything, kind of catch a few out or whatever it is, drive them over, do it again. Is Aqua Pro's here? Did I see him? Oh, I did. I did. So he has a video on his channel with me in it. Came out yesterday, I think. So go check it out. It's pretty cool, actually. It's about plecos and shrimp. I have 2 clown lunches. One of them is just laying on its side. I changed my water, change cycle. Well, Liam, clown lunches like to be in a bigger group, so I just always have to say that. But it's not uncommon for clown lunches to lay on their side. That's kind of the whole clown part of their attitude. So that's real common. I wouldn't necessarily be scared. It always makes me pause. Is that guy dead? But usually they're just fine. They just do that. They play possum. What do you think about a 75 gallon with about 30 guppies, maybe more, with a Sun canister filter as filtration and air pump? Do you know if the filter comes with media? I don't know. I've never actually owned a Sun canister filter, so I don't know if it ships with media. But 30 guppies and a 75 should be easy mode. Real easy. Nina with the $2 super chat. Hope your eye is doing better. It is. Like, I think there's a little bit of, like, you know, a little bit of swelling still, but otherwise doing great. How consistent has your tap water at your store or home been? Ever experienced a worst case scenario where the utility increased chloramine without notifying you? I've never run into that at my own store or own house. At the store we worked at previously, we'd run into it, but it was never catastrophic, and that's why I installed. You guys have seen it a little bit in the live stream, but you haven't seen the video. I installed a whole house filter here at the fish room just for a doomsday scenario, which is very unlikely, but I mostly wanted to make a video about putting one in. That's why I did it, to be honest. My 14-inch clownletches used to freak me out by laying on their sides. Definitely. Think I'd ever do a crayfish or invert live stream? $2 super chat. I might do inverts. Crayfish, the problem is it's illegal to keep them here, and so I'm not like super duper well versed. I know a decent amount about them, but I'm not like crazy well versed. Even the dwarf crayfish, self-cloning, all those are illegal, and so maybe, yeah. I would imagine at some point in time everything will be done on this channel. There'll come a day where we're talking about saltwater, probably. You know, just because it'll be like, oh, I haven't done that yet, or I haven't done that in a long time, type of deal. Best auto feeders for a 40-gallon tank, in my opinion, the best auto feeder for any size tank, except for very, very large aquariums, is the Eheim. I think it's just the Eheim auto feeder. We saw it on the website, and yeah. Will I go to Houston? I don't have any plans on going to Houston, Texas. I have plans, I think, towards the end of the summer to go to Goliad in Texas. I want to go to Goliad Fish Farms. I'm super excited to go there. I'm losing female guppies daily. Platy fry is fine, as are bristlenose pleco fry. Tank is cycled, and I have plants. Water changes are weekly. Any ideas? Are they adult female guppies? They could be getting to their elderly age of 2 years. Could also be that they were bred in brackish water and their kidneys are giving out. Yeah, usually I eliminate disease when all other fry in the tank are correct. So that's just why I'm saying that. Check pH. If your pH is really low, the platy fry will handle it and the plecos will handle it, but the guppies wouldn't. So maybe check there as well. When will the next daily dose be? Thursday. Yes, that is true. Thursday is the next daily dose. Unboxing on Tuesday. Do I like Corey cats because your name is Corey? No, Corey cats like me because my name is Corey. Yeah. I had a pregnant Molly die on me. Could it be she could not give birth to the fry? That's one possibility, Glenn. Yeah, that could be. Complications of birth, pretty common among animals, fish, that type of thing. Could also be that it was just old. Could be that it had another problem. Sometimes really hard to identify what happened. Corey, if I get blackworms from my local fish store, will there be a high chance that my fish will get sick? I did some research and found that sometimes fish get very sick from it. Also could carry worms that carry TB. Well, so the info you might be reading there is a little bit misleading. Typically, tubifex worms are what carry TB, which live blackworms are not tubifex worms. And so tubifex worms can even give humans diseases. So I don't recommend those. But if you were to like call your local fish store and they had live blackworms, I would say like, what day do they come in? And I would buy them like that day or the next day, and you get them as fresh as you can. And if some fish stores don't take good care of them, they can be a little soupy and gross and have like bacteria growing in them, and that's bad for your fish. But any good, healthy worms, pretty limited risk of any diseases. You could get maybe some leeches and stuff like that, but usually they only prey on black worms, so it's not really an issue. Best koi auto feeder? My favorite is the PetMate 7000. It's cheap and it works really well. That's what I use. When is the next daily dose fish unbox? I already said that. Yeah, that's literally happening in a couple of days. Little Bean says, thank you so much for your content. Been struggling with my 65 gallon. Finally got things balanced. Lots of pH issues. And I finally have a small school of neon tetras in there. So satisfying. It is super satisfying. That's what keeps me in the hobby is, like, if I never had problems again, I probably wouldn't keep fish because I enjoy figuring out what went wrong. And then that moment when you're like, yeah, I figured it out. And now I'm not going to have that problem. So that's my favorite part in building stuff, because that whole figuring stuff out, like, how am I going to make that work? So I'm glad you got it figured out, and know that at least my hobby is always that way, because I'm always pushing the bounds of what I can do. And I got the itchiest nose today, by the way. But that's what keeps me motivated, is trying new things. Yikes, TB, should I not be putting the siphon tube in my mouth? Well, Lecter Records, I would say you could watch my video on gravel vacuuming and find some tips on how to do it without putting it in your mouth. But I've probably had, siphon or water in my mouth all the time, and I've so far I've been lucky. So, any summer tubbing projects? Yes. So I was talking to Rachel O'Leary today, which that brings up a good point. I might not be live next Sunday because I might be going down to Portland, Oregon to watch her give a presentation, and Wayne Leibel as well, and then we're all going to drive back up to Seattle for a presentation up here. And so I might not be live next Sunday if I'm doing that trip. But I was talking to her saying, like, tomorrow, as I slam my fist on the desk, tomorrow I'm setting up some ponds, because if I don't, I'm worried that what's going to happen last summer is going to happen this summer. So I'm going to get so busy. I've got all these big things. They're all popping at the same time, right? So we know about June, but there's all these other things. It's like, oh my God, I'm waiting for all these things. They're all happening right now. And if I don't get water and stuff happening like tomorrow, I'm just afraid that pretty soon it's going to be like, oh, it's June 23rd, and then, oh God, it's 4th of July, and then, oh geez, like, it's not even time to do it anymore. So I really want to get it done tomorrow. My goal is to film making some. I want to make the ponds. So I'm going to make them out of pressure-treated 4x4s, and I want to build some stuff and use a liner, and I want to learn. So that's the first thing, is I want to learn how to do it. Meanwhile, teaching you guys how I did it, and hopefully motivate you guys to show you how easy it can be. So I'm just using a liner that I'm going to cut up into pieces so I can build multiple ponds that I bought on Amazon. And then I'm going to buy wood from Home Depot. And then the minimum entry, I think, is going to be probably a drill and a saw of some sort. And then after that, you're probably good. So I think anyone can pretty much do it. And so we're going to see, right? I want to see how it goes. And I'll be so sad if it starts raining tomorrow or something, because I'm really looking forward to, like, all right, today's a filming day. I'm going to do it. And I haven't had a good filming day in probably 3 or 4 days now. So, stocking for the 800-gallon tank, clown loaches. Clown loaches. Lots of clowns. Yes, Wayne Leibel and Rachel are speaking at the same place. You heard that right. Yep. About a 4-hour drive. I don't know what you'll do with your Sunday next week. I have no idea. Someone will probably take my spot, though. Someone will, will hop in there, I'm sure. And there's a chance I'll show up. I'm missing a super chat from LG3 Nation. Here is some money for Jimmy to get a taco. All right. $2.50. That'll buy a couple of tacos where he's from. Here, it only buys like one. I'm due to gravel vac my tank, but I have guppy fry in there, and I'm scared of sucking them up. How do you get around them without stressing them and the parents out? So, Katie, I would probably just change water. And so, most people on the internet use that term loosely, like, oh, I'm going to gravel vac. I gravel vac my tanks very rarely because I have plants. I change water very frequently. So if it was me, I would just change water and not vacuum your gravel unless it was really bad and you didn't have plants and things like that. Does today's theme of consistency contradict not chasing the numbers? Like pH, TDS, etc.? How do you differentiate the two? Well, chasing something and having consistency are two different things. Like if your tap water is 5.0 pH out of the tap and you want to keep Tanganyika cichlids at 9.0 pH, if you could consistently keep it at 7.5 and that was super duper easy and you could consistently do that, that's a way better idea than chasing down 9.0 pH. In my opinion, anyway. I set up a tank for my girlfriend, but she didn't want to wait for the cycle. Now we're in the nitrite stage, and I'm doing 50% water changes, or daily water changes, just to keep it safe. How long does it usually go on for? Well, if you're doing that much daily water change, it's going to go on a long time because you're not really giving it much waste to be able to handle. So my advice to you, Matt, would be hopefully get some live plants. That could help you out. But stop feeding the fish. So like we established earlier. Hold on. Okay, yeah. I was reading the question. I set up my tank for my GF. I was like, wait, did he mean goldfish? And then... But she didn't want to wait, so yes, it is your girlfriend. But if you stop feeding the fish for like a week, so let's say your nitrite is at 1 or 0.5 right now. If you don't feed anymore, it'll stay at 1, and eventually the bacteria will process that down. But if you keep feeding these fish every day, you're going to have to change water every day. And so I personally would stop feeding them. They most likely, I don't know the type of fish, so I'm just going to say, it probably won't make it so aggressive they eat each other, and they're probably not going to starve to death. But if your nitrites get way too high, you could kill them, yeah. How would I acclimate 50 half-inch cardinal tetras to my aquarium? They are mail order. So I personally, when we bring in cardinals, we empty the water into a net, and then we put them straight into our quarantine tanks. That's the way I personally would recommend as well, just because they're mail order, they might have a lot of ammonia built up by the time they make it to you, and dripping that water in would reactivate that ammonia, basically bring up the pH, and adding oxygen is going to cause that ammonia to become toxic again, or could. We don't know how long. It could be overnighted. There could be a lot of factors at play here. But I would acclimate them to a quarantine tank, and I personally would use meds for antibacterial for dang sure, because it's very common for them to get a bacterial infection. But I would do my med trio that I use, and that's how I personally do it. Ooh, I saw, I think, a tip about a pond that I want to read again. Alright, what I want you to do is put... put a strip of black Gorilla Tape on the edge of the window in front of you to take the glare off you through the window. Yeah, that's never going to happen. I could tell you I'm going to do that. That will literally never happen. Because on my list of things to do, that would be so far down. I would likely stop the live stream before doing that. Even though it would make my life easier like this. Oh, geez, no. I won't find the time to do it, unfortunately. Maybe when Jimmy's here, I can say, Jimmy, for the next live stream, make sure we have it so that I'm not getting hit in the eye, and he could do that. Like that's one of the benefits when Jimmy comes here. You can expect those kinds of upgrades of, oh man, there won't be dots on Corey's face anymore. It'll be insane. All right. Well, speaking of not having enough time, I know I've got to get stuff done. We're creeping up on that 1 hour mark. I apologize. I got to go. But I'm trying to catch up. I'm going to spend a bunch of time doing some things this week, and there's not enough time in the day, unfortunately. So, do me a favor, like if you haven't liked already, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Make sure you check out the plant packages. We don't do this very often at all. 30% off is the most we've ever offered, and people have been taking advantage of this since Saturday morning or so. If you haven't already, you could sign up for our newsletter. It's on our website. You get access to kind of all the deals and sometimes special only things and info and all them kind of crazy things on there. And yeah, it's let's see, what's Tuesday? Tuesday is a unboxing from Guppy Train. You guys might be into it. I know I was. And then big changes in the fish room on Thursday, and I haven't scheduled any videos after that yet. There will be, but I just haven't scheduled them yet, so I don't know what to tell you. Other than I'm looking for the button to end this shindig, and thanks for hanging out, everyone. I do have fun, but I gotta start prepping for those ponds I want to build tomorrow. So got to happen. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.